Hello and welcome to another Python lesson. Today we're going to be focused on casting and strings. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is casting. Casting is a function used to specify the data type of variables. And it can also be used to change a variable. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so this is our variable x. Now, right now, x is a int variable, but we can turn our variable into a float variable by using casting. So this is our command to specify the type of a variable. So this is what casting looks like. So you can see we specified the data type and we put a bracket around the variable. And now when we run it, it will read as 4.0. And we can do that with other types of variables. To, for example, I can turn a float variable into a string variable by specifying a float variable into an int variable by specifying the data type. And you see it now reads as 3 as an int variable. And I can even turn an int variable into a string variable. So as we see, and then we can use a command, and then we can print it out and it will read as it will it will it still reads as a string variable, but Python reads it as Python will read it as a string variable. So that's all there is to know about casting. Now we're going to talk a little more about strings. So a string is a variable that contains a series of letters. It could be numbers. Now, obviously, you can use casting to define a string, but normally a string is defined by single quotation marks or double quotation marks. Arcs. So this would be a string. Now, if you want to have letters in, if you want to make a variable with words or letters in it, it has to be a string. Although numbers can be strings, if you want letters and words, it has to be a string and it has to be defined by those single or double quotation marks. So, and the rabbit, that's our string. Now, what if we wanted to make this string multi-line? Well, multi-line strings are defined by 3 double quotation marks. So I could write, hello, my name is Joe. And then at the end, I would put another 3 double quotation marks. And then I could read print A. And you can see it reads the same. Now, so what I've done here is I've created 3 words: fortune, flower, and foresight, and I've sliced them, which means I've taken bits of them and those are the only ones being printed. So for example, I took fortune and sliced it so that only tune would be printed. I took flower and sliced it so only flow would be printed, and I took foresight and sliced it for only sigh to be printed. Now these examples are 3 different types of slicing. So the fortune example is slicing from somewhere in the middle of the string to the end of it. The flower example is slicing from the start of it to somewhere in the middle of it. And the foresight example is slicing from somewhere in the middle of the string to another point in the middle. So let's look at our first example. So when you're slicing a string from somewhere, always make sure that it's one more than the letter. For example, if I want to start at T, the 4th letter, I say go from 3 on. If I want to start at U, the 5th letter, I'd say go from 4 on. But that doesn't apply from ending it. So the formula is print parentheses your variable, and then in square brackets you put the place you want to start at, a colon, and the place you want to end at, and then a square bracket, and then a parentheses. Now if you want to start from the start or end from the end, you just leave that blank. So now what we're going to talk about is modifying and combining strings. So let's take a look at modifying strings. So as you can see, I have my string here. Fortune comes to those who wait. 8. Now I can modify it so that it's in all caps. So what I do is I use the print command, then I add a parentheses, then I put my variable and I put a period and I write upper, which will make it all uppercase. Then I put a pair of parentheses and then our closing parentheses, and it will write, fortune comes to those who wait. And if I want it to be all lower parentheses, I do the same thing, but instead of upper, I put lower. Fortune comes to those who wait. And now there's something really cool we can do, is we can replace a word. So we start out the same with our parentheses, our X, our period, and then we put replace, and we put a pair of parentheses, but then inside those parentheses we put the word we want to replace in quotation marks, and a comma, a space, and then the word we want to replace it with in quotation marks. We close our parentheses, and then we put our last clothing parentheses. And now it says, fortune comes to those who seek, which gives it a whole different meaning. Now, but what if now we're going to talk about combining strings. So it's when we create a new variable that combines variables. So as you can see, I have 4 variables. X is equal to fortune comes to those who wait. Y is equal to fortune comes to those who seek. Z is equal to only when balanced does fortune come. And W is equal to it is false that. So I've combined these strings to make a phrase into our variable A. So A is equal to W plus X plus W plus Y plus Z. Now let's see what happens when we print A. So now, it says, it is false that fortune comes to those who wait. It is false that fortune comes to those who seek. Only when balanced does fortune come. So we've combined all these phrases and strings with opposing meanings, or some that seem random, to create a phrase that makes sense. So I want you to do something similar for your project. I want you to create a string, then use our modifying commands to make it uppercase, make it lowercase, replace is a word. You don't have to do all 3 of these, just do 2. And make a few other strings and create a variable that combines them to form a phrase. So that will be all for today. I hope you have a fun time coding, and I will see you next week.